My younger brother has had a series of medical issues: a hip replacement, a knee replacement, heart condition, diabetes, a check for this, a test for that. He has had to find a way to maneuver through the myriad of medical terms and processes. When he sits down with a doctor for an overview, he always starts by saying, "Look, doc, write it for me in crayon." The good medical professionals can close the gap between doctor and Joe Blow by finding a new way to explain the work, based on the audience at hand. Jesus does the same thing. He uses parables. Our dictionary describes a parable as a short allegory story designated to illustrate or teach some truth, religious principle, or moral lesson, or a statement or comment that conveys a meaning indirectly by the use of comparison, analogy, or the like. In essence, Jesus took big ideas and concepts and tried to explain them the way his audience would understand. He directed his comparisons to the farmers and the homeowners, to the women who baked the bread, the merchants, and the fishermen. Jesus always asked if they understood what he was saying. It was important to him to explain in a way that was within their comprehension. After all, he was talking about a revolution, a new way of seeing the world, a kingdom beyond their ordinary lives. It was those ordinary people who would spread the good news. Those small, ordinary men would be, in part, responsible for the over 2.5 billion Christians in the world today. The mustard seed is so tiny and humble, but the farmers in the group would have known that it is also pervasive and unstoppable. There is a similar story with yeast. I am not a bread maker or a baker at all, but I am aware that it is the yeast that causes the bread to rise. A small amount of dough can double or triple in size. This is the kingdom of heaven that Jesus describes. Don't be fooled by this humble carpenter Jesus. His small beginnings do not mean that he cannot be part of a transformation. Don't be limited by your feelings that you are small and cannot affect change. The kingdom of heaven is here and now, and we're all a part of it. Remember that old Fabergé commercial for shampoo, where the beautiful blonde tried the shampoo, loved it, and told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends, and so on, and so on, and so on. Well, the roots of our faith teach us to love God and to love our neighbors as ourselves, to be kind and fair. That faith in action touches 2 friends, and they pay it forward to 2 of theirs, and so on, and so on. So what can we learn from the parables in 2020? I think anyone tuning into this today already knows the message of the good news. I think what we need to learn is the concept of the parable itself. I know as Anglicans we are not, as a general rule, fervent evangelists. But there are many times in our lives that our faith can be questioned or challenged. And how do we respond? Later in her life, my mom became a member of a Baptist church. It was a loving community that was faithful to her for the rest of her life. As she got to know her Lord better, it was from a distinctly conservative Bible and verse perspective, which was quite a turnabout for us witnessing it in her. She didn't like her religious views or her understanding to be challenged. Things seemed very black and white for a woman who had never been that way all her life. My family could never relate to her now more literal view of the religion, and discussions often ended with an eye roll on one side or a very heavy tss, and my mom shaking her head on the other side. How do we learn to tell our stories and our truths? How do we make the conversation relevant? Jesus spoke in ways people of the time would understand. What do people in our time understand? How can we describe the kingdom in our day and age? There is so much divisiveness in the world today, in our global and local worlds, in our politics, our love lives, our skin color, our religion, and even in our own denominations of faith. How do we tell a story that explains or at the very least allows for the exploration of ideas? How do we cut through the anger and misunderstanding and rhetoric to share the stories of our faith, to live the stories of our faith? Don't get me wrong, I love our history, I love our symbology, our repeated text and prayer. I'm a purist in many things. But sometimes, chapter and verse, left unexplained in a world now living in 2020, obscures the message of the kingdom. That message is love. I'm going to say it again. That message is love. Full stop. Those of you who've been here a long time will remember my two daughters as very active members of the church since birth. They attended and helped in Sunday school. They were part of the youth group, served at the altar, wrapped Christmas gifts for hampers, and played games at summer picnics. Then they grew up and made their own decisions about church. I know I've shared this story with several of you, so bear with me if you're hearing it again. When Brianna was in very rough shape following her car accident and she was pushing through recovery, we had a conversation about prayer and how you, the people of St. Francis, were praying for her. She said, "You know, Mom, I don't believe the same things that you do." And I said, "Well, let's see. Do you believe that we're alone in the universe?" "No," she replied. "That said, can you agree that if we're not alone, there's a high probability that there is life far exceeding our mental and physical capacity, possibly on a different plane of existence?" "Yes," she said. "Do you believe that there is good and evil in the world?" "Of course." "Do you believe in trying your best and making amends when you hurt someone?" "Yes," she said. "Do you believe that love is better than hate?" "Yes." "Do you try to be the best you that you can be and use all your gifts, being smart, helping others, showing kindness?" "Yes," she said. "Well, my darling," I told her, "it appears that you believe exactly the same thing that I believe. We just hear the conversation a bit differently." Find a way to reframe your conversation for the people you are with. Tell a parable to open a dialogue. Make sure you have been understood, or try another example. Hell, try 5 like in today's gospel. The kingdom of heaven starts here, with us. One conversation is like that mustard seed, tiny, seemingly small, and random. Exploring differences in our ideas does not have to be a conflict. Be open to the discussion. Teach like Jesus taught. Know your 2020 audience. Change up the conversation. And if they still don't understand you, write it in crayon.